Welcome to the UNBC Forestry Club Podcast. This podcast is recorded at the Seaford radio station on campus from the traditional unceded territory of Lheidli. You're probably listening from other places in BC or Canada or maybe around the world. We encourage you to recognize the traditional territory you get to learn, play, and live on. All right, smart people, welcome back. Today we are super lucky and fortunate to have the Honourable Minister of Forest, Ravi Parmar, to join us. Thank you so much, Minister, for joining us.
It's Ravi. Such a pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
This is so cool because, you know, after the election last year, and I started following you on your social media. And then he did a big tour, and, you know, up here, and then I left a note underneath your Instagram page. And yeah, email me, and then 2 months later, this happened.
Yeah, well, no, it's fantastic. I so appreciate it. I am a big fan of yours. I've got a chance to listen to some episodes now. I'm a Spotify user, and so I've now it automatically downloads.
Right.
So whenever there's a long flight, I'm listening to all the interesting conversations that you're having on forestry.
Appreciate that.
Columbia. No, it's fantastic.
Yeah, we just want to facilitate conversation in forestry and trying to get professionals from all different fields.
Oh, you bet.
And come talk to us. We're just going to jump right into it. So for all the guests that come up, we always want to know a little bit about yourself. So maybe can you tell people, you know, what's your educational background, and then, you know, what's your career? How do you become the Minister of Forest, the CEO of this huge company, basically?
Yeah, by not having any forestry experience, I guess, to start with. I say that as a bit of a joke. Maybe a little bit of background. Son of immigrants who came to this country with very little, been able to build an incredible life. Mom and dad, grandmother from Punjab, India, big agricultural province in India.
Right.
Came here to Victoria, to Langford, the big city for us, and really did build a good life. And grew up middle-class family that afforded me some opportunities to go to university, study political science. I'm a poli-sci nerd. Gained my degree. Didn't have the best experience at university because I got a bit bored. Decided I wanted to go and put my name forward and become a politician, and I got elected on my 20th birthday to serve as the trustee for the Sault School District.
Oh, cool.
A couple of years later, became the board chair. Big passion for me is public education. I think it's the great equalizer and the most important investment government can make in its citizens, even more so than healthcare. I think public education is that foundational piece. But really, in terms of the politics and why I'm here sitting in this chair across from you, is you may know our former Premier, John Horgan, passed away last year. John was my mentor. I would not be in this chair sitting across from you if it wasn't for John Horgan. I met him when I was 10 years old in elementary school, grade 5. I was doing a class project on the election, the 2005 election. I was a bit of a keener, even in grade 5, and I decided to ask my teacher, what could I do to get some extra credit? Because in grade 5, of course, kids are, thinking about what they can do to get an A+.
Right.
And so I went to my teacher, and she's like, well, why don't you invite the person who wins in your riding, the MLA in the election? That happened to be John Horgan. Called his office, and he arrived. And, little did I know back then in grade 5 as a 10-year-old, how much he would shape the rest of my life.
Right.
To the point where I, made the decision to run to be a trustee, served as board chair, and then made the decision to replace him when he retired, coming on a couple of years ago. And so
that's cool.
It's been a damn privilege to be the MLA for Langford, Wandafuka, now Langford Highlands. And I did something pretty crazy 5 months ago. Sat across from the Premier at a table like this, and did something that some would say is political suicide, and that is asked to be British Columbia's Minister of Forests.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Working for the government is probably one of the hardest jobs. Working for the Minister of Forest in the forest sector, I don't think there's anything harder than that. I would always use this, metaphor that the forestry, BC Forestry is a huge boat. And then you as the captain of the boat, wherever you, because everybody on this this boat to go different directions. So wherever you're going, some people's going to be upset.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way you can make everybody happy.
That's right.
So once you get this job, I guess, was there anything surprised you? Like, what was your expectation for this position?
I got the call. So a week before the swearing-in ceremony, I sit across from the Premier. I make the pitch that I'd love to be a member of your cabinet, love to serve as British Columbia's Forest Minister. So Sunday, I get the call. Monday's the ceremony.
Right.
And the call is confidential. Premier calls me and says, Ravi, I want you to be my Forest Minister. But I'm, really looking forward to working with you and for you to help me with this important file. It was a really quick call because he had a lot of calls to make that
right,
day.
Yeah.
Of course, it was confidential. And so I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell my parents. I couldn't tell anyone. I just told them, hey, if you got some time tomorrow, I'd love for you to come to a ceremony. And I think they read between the lines. So that night, I couldn't sleep. And I kept thinking to myself, I got some advice from a couple of other mentors that I had who had said, if you get the call, I want you to think about what you want to say to your deputy minister, what you want to say to your political staff, what do you want to say to the public, to the stakeholders that you're going to begin talking to. And I really, for me, that night and that morning as I drove to the legislature and prepared to take the oath to become a member of Executive Council, British Columbia's Minister of Forests, I had three kind of key pillars that I think would keep me going, and they remain today. One is restoring confidence in the sector. The second is standing up and delivering for workers and families in forest-dependent communities each and every day in the actions that I take. And the third is honoring the commitments that we have made as a government over the course of the last number of years to biodiversity and to the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So those were my three pillars, and I made a commitment to myself that I would say those three pillars to everyone. I've always been a believer that you got to be blunt, you got to be frank with people, and so it doesn't matter if I was sitting across from the CEO of Canfor or the CEO of another major forest industry partner or a contractor, the president of a university, doesn't matter, environmental organization. I wanted to say the same three commitments, the First Nations leaders, same same commitments to those individuals. And I think it served me well. I think it really helped me set up what has been quite the busy 5 months that I've had.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's you had a super long, busy day. I kind of follow your Instagram story from this morning. You did another podcast with John Brink. Which
That's right.
He was on our podcast as well, kind of sharing the history of PG forestry and everything.
I'll have to catch that one. I didn't see that one.
That one got exploded. That's got like 15,000 or 16,000 views or something like that.
Not surprised. John Brink will do that. That guy, got a lot of respect from hustle. Like someone who came here with nothing and built a pretty good life for himself and is a great employer and has done quite well.
$25.47.
You got it.
Something like that. Right. Yeah, that's right, right?
Attitude, passion, and work ethic.
Suitcase, couple shirts, and
that's it. That's it.
Shout out to John.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me a day in the life of Minister of Forest? When you wake up, what do you even do throughout the day?
Well, it's different. When I think back to the first day. After the ceremony was complete, I met my deputy minister, my associate deputy minister, and very next day I got a big binder. I had one really big binder that was called my transition binder, and then I had a small binder that kind of outlined the next 2 months for me, and it was a pretty simple schedule. It was briefing after briefing after briefing after briefing times a gazillion. And so I remember calling my deputy minister that night and saying, hey, man, I don't think this is going to work for me.
Right.
I just want to let you know that I'm planning on going to Vanderhoof tomorrow. And he's like, oh, okay. Do you want us to reschedule the briefing? I'm like, reschedule them all. I'll let you know when I want to be briefed.
Right.
So that night I read my binder. But it was important for me as a guy from Langford who doesn't come with, decades of experience in the forest sector, to actually go to where forestry is happening. And in particular, I wanted to visit Prince George. I wanted to visit the north, the central interior, and in particular visit Vanderhoof, because that was a community that had been hard hit and was about to be hard hit with mill closures and curtailments. You remember the mill shut down there just this past year. It was important for me to meet with the mayor of Fraser Lake, Vanderhoof, some councillors, the mayor of Houston, as well as a whole host of folks, and start engaging with members of the Forest Service team to talk about those challenges. And I made a commitment to those mayors that they would get sick and tired of seeing here. I think it's my fourth trip to Prince George just in the last few months, because I felt that it was important for me to do that work. And that's why I've been on the road, as you'll have seen from my Instagram stories. I've always been a big believer that before one should act, they should be doing a lot of listening and learning, because I want to make sure that when I'm ready to make decisions, that they're founded in the truths of what people have to share. And I've been proud of the work that we have been able to do. We've been able to visit over 20 communities, probably double that if we look at First Nations communities as well, and really do a lot of listening and learning and learning about how we can work together. And it's been a lot of fun. A lot of work, a lot of very long days, without a doubt.
Like today?
I went snowshoeing for the first time.
Where about?
Fraser Lake.
Oh.
Only fell once. Never. I had a friend who went snowshoeing, and I'm like, "What is snowshoeing?" So I'm from Victoria, and when it snows, it's like a holiday in Victoria. The roads are all shut down, no bus service, schools shut down. That's just another day here at Prince George.
Yep.
And so I went snowshoeing with Sarah Story, who's the mayor of Fraser Lake. Highly recommend her as a potential guest for your podcast.
I want to come here for sure.
Yeah, and she's incredible. And she took me out to the community forest they have to show me commercial thinning in action that they have going on. And it's been incredible. And so I had the big, huge, humongous, I'm size 15 boots, so big, humongous snowshoes. We went out, only fell once, but it was an incredible experience. And I just think so many experiences like that. I remember, being out here in Prince George on the territories of the Klekle First Nations with two guys named Sheldon and Glenn, who operate the Klekle forestry arm. And they showed me didn't just talk about world-class civiculture practices. They were showing me world-class civiculture practices, selective harvesting, commercial thinning, all of these different pieces. And what was the icing on the cake was I saw it on the ground. I was in the bush engaging with loggers and contractors and seeing this. And then they took me up in a helicopter and I flew over these cut blocks. And you could see moose tracks everywhere. And I actually saw 8 moose up there in these
helicopter?
cut blocks. Yeah, it was incredible.
Cool.
So many stories that I could bore you with. And so I guess to go back to your question, every day is different. When I'm in Victoria, I'm obviously meeting with my team, getting briefed on issues, meeting with lots of people, whether it's forest sector, environmental organizations, so many people. And I've really made a commitment to myself and to my team that I want to be as available, open door policy. If someone wants to help invest in British Columbia, someone wants to, maybe not make a, financial investment, but bring something to the table to forestry, I will make all the time in the world for them. And it's the onus on me to do that. And so it's been absolutely fantastic. Long days without a doubt, but every day excites me and keeps me up at night as well.
That's crazy. Yeah, you have so much energy. You had a long day today from very early and all the way to nowadays. And then we're actually going to our ring ceremony.
That's right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for coming. It's such an honor to have the Minister of Forest to join.
It's my pleasure.
Because we're graduating and then we get this, because not everybody get it, the ring, and only the engineers and foresters get it.
Well, I'm hoping after my time as Minister of Forest, I might be able to
get one?
To get a ring. Just
you should. You should. You get like full 10 fingers.
Maybe. It depends on how I go. It's interesting. We live in interesting times with President Donald Trump and whatever comes out of his mouth or whatever comes out in the form of a tweet. And so our forest sector faces a lot of challenges and a lot of uncertainty these days. And, certainly that's what I heard and talked about at the GOFI convention as well.
Speaking of that, this 25% tariffs, even more. I was talking to the chief economist Kurt from Kofi that sounds like they combined almost like 40% tariff and duty combined. As a forestry students, we're looking to get a job and to pay off our student loan and have those little bit of certainty in the future. But it looks like it's really uncertain right now, just because the stress, pressure coming down south. How can forestry communities in BC work together, and what can we do to combat that?
Yeah, great question. Look, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. Actually, this afternoon we found out that the countervailing duty rates, preliminary rates, have come out. And so for an operation like CAN4, with the anti-dumping duties, the preliminary countervailing duties, they're looking at a 46% tax.
What?
For everyone else, it's about 35%. And if you add the threat of the Trump tariff, that's another 25%. And then who knows what the Section 232 order that the president launched maybe a month ago will bring. We rely way too heavily on the Americans to buy our softwood lumber. And it's tough because it's so easy. They're just right below us.
Just down there.
Exactly. And they need it. Like, we send billions of board feet to the Americans. Almost 30% of their supply comes from Canada, with a big chunk of that coming from British Columbia. And so I often talk about it. I was in California a couple of months ago, meeting with lawmakers, engaging with forest sector representatives down there, and just people from all walks of life, Republicans, Democrats. And I said, this Trump tariff and these softwood lumber duties that are set to go up, this hurts British Columbia, this hurts Canadians, it hurts forestry workers. But this is nothing more than a middle-class tax on Americans who are just looking to build homes, or in the case of California, rebuild homes after devastating wildfire seasons. Right. And so, rightfully so, I guess you asked the question, where do we go from here? Well, we have to diversify. We have to find better trading partners. We could never be put in this position again. Say we got a deal tomorrow and softwood lumber duties didn't exist, Trump tariff was off the table. We can't put ourselves in this position again. We have to go and find other markets. We have to build up those relationships in Japan and Korea, South Korea, as well as India and Europe and the Middle East and elsewhere. And we got to convince them to buy our lumber. And I think we can do that. And that's one of the tasks that the Premier has given me, is to ensure that we are able to diversify our forest sector. We're in a pretty good position here in British Columbia in general. A little bit too reliant on it when it comes to wood-based products, but it's challenging because it's so easy to just go down south.
I actually scroll TikTok, and then the governor of California,
Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, he posted a TikTok, and then sounds like they are trying to find other partners as well. Is there a chance that we can work around the USA federal system and then kind of work directly with
same question I asked my staff when I became minister. Like, is there a way around this? No, unfortunately not. The prices are going to go up. The price of lumber is going to go up, and so I don't know if that will cover these duties at some point. You may remember in 2021, prices were about $1,600 per board feet, and that was just incredible. Everyone was making money hand over fist, and so. Duties and tariffs is one thing. We're going to have to contend with it. We're going to have to help our sector. I'm hoping the federal government will step up. We don't hear a lot of talk about forestry in the federal election. I've always been quite frustrated that if we were talking about auto, the federal government would be there with supports. They'd have $1 billion on the table. But for forestry, they don't show up in the same way, and that's frustrating. And so, looking to Mark Carney, Pierre Poilievre, Jagmeet Singh, and all those guys, they need to step up. They need to make sure that the federal government is at the table providing loan guarantee programs, bonding support, and a whole host of things. But let's also remember that softwood lumber duties and tariffs, that's devastating. It's not the only thing that is a threat to this forest sector. In 2023, British Columbia had the worst wildfire season on record.
I caught in one of those.
Is that right, eh? Yeah, I can't imagine. I can't imagine what people have gone through. You think being the Minister of Forests is one thing, also being the minister responsible for the BC Wildfire Service, holy smokes, is that a file in itself? And so in that 1 year, 2023, worst wildfire season on record, we lost 20 years worth of harvestable timber. which is significant. And so wildfires have caused a lot of damage to British Columbia. It's even taken out a whole city in the case of Lytton. But it's also impacted us financially as well, economically. I was talking about it in my Kofi speech today, how this is an economic crisis, a forestry crisis, a safety crisis, all in one. And so, I say that because we have to respond. I'm sure, you've had guests and others talk about these Nordic countries in terms of the work that they've been doing. And they are such smaller footprints than us, but get so much more fiber out of their forests. And it's because of commercial thinning, as an example. One of the things that I announced today, that as part of my review of BC timber sales, because that was an important aspect of my role as Minister of Forests, was to launch a review in BC timber sales, and made a commitment that it was going to be the most efficient review the Ministry of Forests has ever done. Going to be done within 6 months. Announced a couple of things today. One was just rehauling our auction system to get more bids going, but also, making a commitment and letting British Columbians know that BCTS was going to play a bigger role in active forest management. That means commercial thinning. That means selective logging, partial harvesting. I had an opportunity to be in Burns Lake a couple of months ago and meet Chief Karina Lewin of the Chislada First Nation. She was kind enough to take me up in a helicopter over her territory. Now, this nation up by Burns Lake has lost over half of its territory to wildfires and floods. And she was pointing down at an area and said, "Minister, do you know what that is?" And I'm like, "Chief, it looks like the fire, came over here as well." And she's like, "Yes, but that's an old growth management area." And so there's a belief and that if you just put, a circle around it and just preserve it, that everything's going to be okay. Not in the north. You have to manage your land. You have to steward your land.
Active management.
And so, exactly, active forest management. And so, that doesn't mean going in and clear cutting by any means. We have lost social license with First Nations communities on that. It's one of the challenges we face today. But we have to actively manage our land and steward our land. First Nations have been doing that since time immemorial. And it's only taken us, however long, a couple hundred years to figure it out. And we have to build back that social license. We have to play that role in our provincial parks as well. Because otherwise, all this land that we're trying to protect, all this timber harvesting land base that we're trying to get value out of, we're going to lose it in parks. We're going to, rather, not even parks, we're going to lose it in fires. And that's a big issue.
Yeah. Speaking of this topic, and I went to college in Ontario, and they use a silviculture system called single-choice selection. And some of the shelter wood it's very forestry term, but essentially it's just a partial harvesting system. And they use that system, they'd be able to log in their provincial park. And then if you go there, people freak out, "Oh, you're going to log provincial park." But if you go there and people, they don't tell you what it is, you have no idea it's a cut block, because it's such a low ecological footprint harvesting system. Require tree markings, and it's actually one of my projects I'm working on right now to graduate from UNBC. Anyway,
it's incredible. I really wish we were doing this 20 years ago. It's taken us way too long to figure it out. And it's a huge opportunity. It's a big priority for me as minister, and I am reorganizing my ministry to make this a top priority. We're going to be leaders here in British Columbia in managing our land.
Exactly.
And maybe manage, I've been, sometimes managing may not be the most appropriate term, because managing means something different to anyone. But stewarding our land, doing our work. And when you talk about, graduating and trying to find work in forestry, for most people, when they think of forestry jobs, they tend to think of people working in mills. Right?
So very true.
Totally.
Very true.
I hear that all the time back home. Thousands of jobs in mill, and they are. And we know that that's changing. We've seen the closures and curtailments. But if I think of one of the most significant job creation programs that we can have in this province, is young people like yourself out in the bush, being foresters, and doing this work, leading the way with the massive land. Like British Columbia, I think don't quote me on this, but is I think larger than France and some of these European countries.
Like
again,
90-something million hectares.
Yeah, like ridiculously large province we have compared to other countries. And here is an opportunity for us to be able to hire young people, hire Indigenous people all across the province, not just to plant trees. Like we planted 281 million trees last year, but to do reforestation, but also to just go and steward the land, to lead in selective logging, partial harvesting, commercial thinning, wildfire mitigation, prescribed burns, cultural burns, you name it. There's a huge job creation opportunity here.
That's super cheering and inspiring to hear that. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And right now we're kind of we mentioned, we're in the crisis right now, economic and forestry, and, people just suffering a little bit right now, and there's more pressure coming down south. And then I work in the forestry industry for a couple of years before I came back to UNBC, and then I've been hearing, BC is one of the highest operating costs, like
high cost jurisdictions.
Yeah. Whether we should to reduce the operating costs. Do you think this is the time to do it, or is it what's the government role on this?
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, look, I think we chatted a bit about this at Kofi earlier today. Creating certainty and predictability in getting fiber supply to mills, to licensees, I think will lower costs in the long run. But I also, I always get pissed when people try to compare British Columbia to a place like Alberta, which happens to be our neighbors. Now, have you been to Alberta?
Yeah.
I've only been a couple of times to Calgary and Edmonton, but Alberta's flat.
Yeah.
British Columbia is not. It's mountainous terrain. And so transportation cost is one of the biggest challenges that we have in British Columbia. Trucks going up and down hills and logging on cliffs. You don't have that in Alberta.
No.
And so I'm the first to point it out, because if you were going to try to compare us to Alberta in terms of cost jurisdiction, folks, give your head a shake. But, there are some things that we can do. We have to find ways to reduce transportation costs. My ministry is doing a lot of work in terms of our pricing and appraisal manuals, because we also want to get fiber out of the bush to the best of our ability. There's nothing more that frustrates people than seeing slash pile burning happening, right? That's frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
You're basically burning money, and we have to put a stop to that. But, John Brink probably talked about this in your podcast. Our mills are here. We used to harvest here, and now we're harvesting over here.
Yeah.
And so we've got to find a way to make that economical. And that's going to be a challenge, but I've got a commitment in my mandate letter, the direction that I've received from the Premier, to get us to the pathway to a sustainable timber harvesting land base that produces 45 million cubic meters of harvest each and every year. And I'm working with industry. I joke that this is not just my problem. This is our problem. We need to work together on this. And that means companies having to step up. It means that we've got to get companies that have done very well here, that have made a lot of money on the backs of our forests and our people, and have made decisions in the past to go and invest elsewhere when times get tough. There's tons of examples of that, Canfor being one of them. And I expect those companies, I recognize that they've got shareholders that they've got to work with, but in good times and bad times, they should be here, they should be investing in their people, and they should be working with us to address the challenges we have. That's my expectation, and that's my hope.
Good to hear that. I'm just going to move down from this question list. So we also, I don't know, it's not a criticism, but like a comment that, you're coming in as I think Bachelor of Arts is your background. And, we hear people talking about the Minister of Forest basically have, how do I put it in this polite way, without any forestry backgrounds, what do you have? Do you have anything to say for people who have those kind of comments?
Yeah, I did a bit of a LinkedIn post on this last week where I touched on, the question that I think people must be asking themselves. What is a 30-year-old kid from Langford doing as BC's forest minister? There's been a lot of forest ministers the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And people with lots of industry experience, people with different types of natural resources experience, and we still face the same challenges. I'm unique in terms of those forest ministers because I actually asked for the job.
Yeah.
The reason I asked for the job is I believe in the sector. I believe in the power of forestry. And my number one focus is restoring confidence in the sector, standing up for workers, honoring our commitments, but also making sure that British Columbia has the most people-focused forest sector in the world. And as we do that, I think the perspective that I bring is I don't come with bias. I don't come with decades of forest experience. I bring a fresh perspective. And I've faced ageism my entire life. It comes with the job of being an MLA in your 20s and now early 30s, a school board trustee, et cetera, as the chief of staff to several cabinet ministers before joining politics. And there is there's always a belief. There's some people who say, young people, they got to step up, they got to be leaders. But when you try to be leaders, they'll be the first to criticize you.
Yeah.
And that's deeply frustrating. That pisses me off. And so, I met a guy named Jack Gardner from Salmon Arm. He sent me an email, a letter, telling me that he bought the old Teal Jones facility in Salmon Arm.
I saw that post.
And I sent, I responded, got my staff to respond immediately, got his phone number, and I gave him a call. And he told me that he believed in me and he believed in the forest sector. A few weeks later, I was in Salmon Arm. I met Jack. I toured his facility, met his dad, met his brother, and he did something really gutsy. At 30 years old, he worked in the forest sector up until that point. He put everything on the line, everything he owned, and bought that mill. And he employed people again in his community. He's creating value-added products. I got mad respect for that. And if Jack didn't do that, that town wouldn't have dozens of jobs. There wouldn't be that value-added facility operating. Jack, at 30 years old, did that. And so, my response to those people is give us a chance. We're going to make mistakes. I am not a perfect human being by any means. But give us a chance. Give us the opportunity. My critic, Ward Stamer from the BC Conservative Party, comes with decades of experience in the forest sector. When I became minister and he was appointed critic, I sent him a letter saying I appreciate the fact that he brings a lot of experience. I'm looking forward to working with him, and I'd love to meet with him. Never got a response back. Then finally did, and we scheduled a meeting. And I didn't get much out of it. It was just complaint after complaint, and I know better. And I know better than First Nations. And I thought to myself, well, I'm glad you're not forest minister, because nothing would ever get done. You would just fight people. You would fight people in courts. You'd fight people in communities. A very loud guy. And so, that's just not my style, and it's not the style this sector needs. I think the sector needs someone to come in and bring people together. And I will hold people accountable without a doubt. But I also will use this platform to bring people together. I love, so many people that I've met. I met a guy named Bill from Gorman Brothers in West Kelowna who had worked there for 48 years. Yeah. I met an incredible team of young men operating Deadwood Innovations in Fort St. James, just leading the way in terms of using aspen and burnt timber and I don't even know how to explain what they do, but creating this incredible value-added products. I've got it sitting on a shelf in my office. There's so many people that I've met that are leading the way. They're young people, they're experienced people. I met a guy named Miles at the Lakes Resiliency Forest Landscape Planning Table who told me that I was number 13, the 13th forest minister that he's ever worked with. Lucky 13, I guess. Yeah,
lucky 13.
But yeah, it's I'm going to get that criticism. I'm used to it. But I hope people will judge me based off of the actions that I take. And I want to get stuff done in this role. And I'm excited to do that. Yeah.
I didn't know there's a positions appointed critics.
Yeah,
that's a thing, hey?
That's right, yeah.
That's crazy.
Their job is to critique, and that they do.
They get paid to
throw rocks,
talk crap, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I should say part of the parliamentary democracy system. It's a role that they play, but criticism is one thing.
I know,
I always welcome ideas as well. So,
Yeah.
Ward, if you're listening out there, if you got any ideas, you know where to find me.
Right on. And then this is kind of like a little sensitive topic. It's about First Nation. And so we have this fascinating forest landscape plan, kind of making people to sit down. And then one thing unique about BC is we have 200 First Nations in the province.
That's right.
More than that. And then we have this kind of overlapping claims and people kind of overlapping territories. And so when it comes down to this forest management, and then sometimes they have very divided opinions and how the objectives, how they want to manage their land. So when it comes to those conflicts between nations, what do you think is the role of government should play in those kind of really tough situation? What can government, or even should government do anything to kind of play like a mediator, or like, what is the role of government when it comes to this, trying to find harmony?
What a great question! Really thoughtfully put out as well. I appreciate that very much.
Thanks.
It's my job full time, engaging with chiefs, with councils, with forestry arms. It's the best part of my job. It's also the most challenging aspect of my job. I've sat at 3 forest landscape planning tables where fists have been pumped banged on the table, and people have expressed their frustration and anger.
Yeah.
And many of them have every right to. They have not been at the table. They have not been asked about what's been going on their territories, and they are paying the price of successive governments and industries that have come in and decimated their lands. And they have every right, because the courts have said time and time again, to be stewards of their land, and for us to work towards shared decision making, towards making sure that there's true, lasting, and meaningful reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And so, I think there are those that think, government should just cower it and just let people figure it out. I don't believe that at all. I want to be at the table. I want to be able to have tough conversations. If I was sitting across from you and you were a chief and you'd be really pissed at me, I want you to tell me that you're pissed at me. Because I want to hear that. I want you to be blunt. I say to my team on day one, never sugarcoat it for this guy, because if I'm going to be blunt, I want you to be blunt with me. And so we have to have these tough conversations. There's a lot of nations that are leading the way. I think of George Lampreau from the Simpcw First Nations. With a little bit of brevity, I'll share with you, when I first met Chief Lampreau, I could tell the relationship between government and himself was not good. A bit of challenges with my predecessor in terms of decisions that had been made. And so the team had given me a heads up before I met, and I told him, let's start fresh. I want to learn from you. I want to listen to what you've done, and let's do it. And so we met again, and then I went and visited him, and he reminded me in that first conversation, second conversation, and third conversation, the minister, I'm leading the way, and I need you to catch up. I'm a bit of a sports guy, very competitive, and so if someone's telling me that they're beating me, then I got to catch up. And I laugh because as I finished my last meeting with him at his office in Barrier, just outside at a Barrier when we were going up to Clearwater, he got in the car, we were driving, and he passed me, and then we passed him, and then at the end he passed me again, and we were not speeding by any means. I didn't even halfway realize that he was there, but it was just that funny kind of mental image of the chief still beating me, and so it's fun, right? Like we're racing towards success. We're not racing to the bottom. And I said to the chief, your leadership is incredible. Let's work together to solve these challenges. Let's find ways to be able to address them at forest landscape planning tables, and let's pilot stuff. I think one of the things that drive me crazy as a politician is getting stuck in the maybe. Like, let's maybe make a decision.
Yeah.
Let's maybe do this. Let's maybe do that. Let's pilot stuff. Let's give it a try. And if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. We'll just try something else. And that's, I think, something that we have not done enough in forestry. And again, I look to registered foresters. I look to new people like yourself. I met a crew at UBC I don't know if there's friendly competition between you.
No, we're just siblings.
Okay.
We love each.
Okay,
we
good.
are just Fortune family.
That's right. That's
love
right.
each other's.
Harry Nelson, the professor there, was at the Truck Loggers Convention, and he brought some of his forestry students, and one of them pulled me aside and said, I just put myself through school. Do I have a future in forestry, Minister? And that really shook me in my core. And I said to him, boy, am I ever going to work hard to make sure you do. But I need your help. And when I said I need your help, I said, I want your advice and guidance. And it became kind of a class assignment. I met with them twice. They're actually going to come to Victoria to further have discussions with me. And they've prepared a paper for me on recommendations they think I should affect to be able to change the forest sector. And I so appreciate that. Like, I need every help, as much help as I can get. Like, this is a massive job and responsibility, and I need British Columbians to provide their feedback, people from all walks of life.
This is such a strong statement. I really appreciate that. I think everybody coming into forestry probably wouldn't thought about, like, the most important skill nowadays in forestry is probably the communication skills, having the ability to listen. Because people think about communication as express, but the power of communication is actually listen, and which is one of the reasons we're doing this, which is to listen to all kind of different people. And I think UNBC can help us well. We'll have a forestry club, and then have students, and then maybe we'll find a way to give you some of our thoughts as well.
I'd love that. I could use all the help I can get, but also, there's, the polling has showed there's a level of trust people have in foresters, in particular registered professional foresters. And so as the next generation coming in, you've got incredible ideas. You've just gone through a significant amount of schooling, and we need to elevate you, and we need to celebrate you. You are our leaders. And so it goes back to your question around, being a young 30-year-old inexperienced forest minister. That's okay. We need to bring that experience that people have from all walks of life and elevate them and allow them to be leaders. And we need to give them space to be able to make mistakes and be successful. And I am blessed that the Premier has given me this responsibility and given me space to go and make mistakes and try to build up this sector. Like Premier Eby has just been an incredible mentor for me, especially, it's been a tough time, losing my mentor, John Horgan. Has not been easy the last 6 months. I'll say that it's been very difficult. Yeah. But David has just been such an incredible other mentor to be able to see the leadership that he has shown and the support that he provides has been incredible. And I'm really lucky blessed that he's given me this responsibility, and I want to make him and all British Columbians proud.
Heck yeah! Just looking at time right now, we have about 2.5 minutes. Maybe the last question that I kind of ask everybody is, what do you have any messages for forestry students in school getting trained right now, trying to be the next patch of forest manager, going to take over, not trying to just take over some of the very important roles in forestry. Do you have any messages for those
Absolutely people? Take over. We need you. We need you now more than ever. We are beginning the work today. I'll give you the last line that I left at Kofi today.
Yeah.
2025 is the year that we began the hard work to develop the pathway to ensuring that we have a strong, sustainable, and viable and robust forest sector for the next 100 years. So when this podcast is still going on 100 years from now, and there's a student sitting in your seat and a minister sitting in this seat, I am hopeful that they'll be able to look back and say, man,
we started it.
We started it. Exactly. We started that work. And so to any forestry student, whether they're here at UNBC, UBC, all across the province, all across the world, come to British Columbia. Come and be a part of our forest sector. Come enjoy the beauty that is British Columbia and help me solve this challenge so we can create prosperity from people all around British Columbia. That's our challenge, but that's our opportunity as well.
Thank you so much for coming to our podcast today. I really, really appreciate this.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.